Seoul was quieter than Evie expected. She sat near the window of a tucked-away cafe just off the Han River, stirring a spoon through her creamy latte. Morning light spilled over the table, catching on the curve of her sunglasses. Her braids were pinned up beneath a tan bucket hat, and a half-finished travel journal lay open beside her, dotted with little hearts and doodled handbox. It was her third day in South Korea, and for the first time in a long time, her shoulders didn't feel like bricks. No work emails, no bosses breathing down her neck. No, you should smile more from men who couldn't pronounce her name right. Just peace, paper, and perfectly brewed coffee. She sipped slowly, breathing in cinnamon and calm. Then the cafe door opened, and in walked Trouble. Or, well-dressed Trouble, to be exact. The man had the kind of face that belonged in cologne commercials. Sharp jaw, tousled dark hair, and a coat that whispered custom tailored. But there was something else too. Tension in his stride, like someone who had a schedule printed behind his eyes. He walked straight to the counter, murmured an order in rapid Korean, then patted his pockets, paused, frowned, checked again. The barista blinked. So did Evie. "Ah, one moment," the man said, switching smoothly into English. I must have left my wallet. In the car. Possibly." He looked genuinely stunned, as if forgetting something was new territory. The barista gave an apologetic smile but didn't move. Evie glanced at the man again. Something in his body language struck her. Not arrogance, not panic. Just a kind of quiet frustration. Like forgetting his wallet wasn't just an inconvenience, but a failure. She stood, walked to the counter, and slipped her card forward. "Add his drink to mine," she said with a shrug. "Looks like Seoul coffee just got more expensive for me." The man turned toward her slowly, eyebrows raised. "You don't have to," he began. "But I already did," she said, voice light. There was a beat. Then the faintest smile tugged at his lips. Slow, unfamiliar, like he hadn't used those muscles in a while. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That's unusually kind." Evie gave a playful shrug. "Well, you looked like you needed a break more than I did." He watched her for a second too long, like he wanted to ask who she was. Why she'd do that? But the barista handed over the drinks, and the moment passed. "Enjoy your morning," he said, "and your very expensive coffee." Evie grinned. "I'll put it on my vacation tax write-off." He chuckled, a short, surprised sound, and walked out the door. She returned to her seat, heart oddly full. What a strange little moment. A small kindness that cost her, 6,001? A smile? A laugh? She looked at the receipt, considered tucking it into her journal, but instead let it fall into the trash beside the table. No big deal. Hours later, the man returned. He stood outside the cafe for a moment, glancing in through the windows. The space was mostly empty now. His eyes scanned each table with calm precision, but the seat by the window was vacant. He walked in, approached the barista, and spoke quietly in Korean. "The woman who paid for my coffee earlier. Foreign. Braids. Did she say her name?" The barista hesitated, then shook her head. Jong-Su exhaled, frustrated. Not with the barista, with himself. He should have asked. He turned to leave, then noticed something on the floor beside the trash can. A crumpled receipt, barely touched, still dry from the morning. He picked it up. Evie Janbett. Card ending in 3321. 12,001. 2 lattes. A small crease appeared between his brows. He folded the receipt carefully and slid it into his wallet. Outside, the wind danced along the river. Somewhere across Seoul, a woman with cinnamon-sweet coffee on her breath had no idea she'd just triggered the most important search of Jong-Su's life. Not for her name, not for her number, but for the only thing he didn't know how to buy, a reason to feel human again. Jong-Su wasn't used to not knowing. His life ran like clockwork, each meeting scheduled to the minute, each acquisition mapped 3 fiscal quarters in advance. He built empires by predicting people before they even spoke. Yet here he was, days later, replaying the same 7-second encounter with a stranger who'd paid for his coffee as if it were a prophecy. Her voice lingered, her laugh, the way she'd said, "Looks like Seoul coffee just got more expensive for me." He'd kept the receipt in his wallet like a secret, checking it twice as though the name Evie Janbett might reveal coordinates or purpose. He didn't understand why it mattered. It shouldn't, but it did. He called his assistant, Minjai. "Find out who this card holder is." Minjai hesitated. "Sir, privacy laws." "I know," Jong-Su cut in gently. "I'm not asking you to invade. Just find out if she's local or visiting." A pause. Then, "I'll do what I can." He hung up, realizing how absurd it was. The CEO of Han Group, a man who'd been on the cover of Forbes Korea 3 times, chasing a name off a receipt. He almost laughed, but something about that morning, her warmth, her normalcy, had unsettled the carefully stacked dominoes of his life. Meanwhile, Evie was back in Hongdae, wandering through rows of art shops and street stalls, her hands wrapped around another paper cup of coffee. The caffeine wasn't the point. It was the quiet, the rhythm of a place where no one expected her to have answers. Her vacation was halfway over, and she still hadn't figured out what she was supposed to do when she got home. Her old job offer was gone. Her apartment lease had expired. Brooklyn felt far away and heavy. She stopped by a small cafe again, the same chain where she'd first met the forgetful stranger. The barista from before recognized her. "Oh, you came back," the young man said in accented English, beaming. "The kind woman who paid for that man's drink." Evie chuckled. "Yeah, that was me. Did he ever come back?" The barista nodded quickly. "He came back that same afternoon. Asked about you. Looked disappointed when I didn't know." Evie blinked, surprised. "He did?" "Yes. I think he really wanted to thank you." "Well," she smiled, "tell him next time to remember his wallet first." They both laughed, but a tiny flicker of curiosity lit in her chest. Who was that man? His clothes had screamed money, but his eyes had whispered exhaustion. She pushed the thought aside and checked her phone. She'd seen a flyer about an English language book tucked nearby. Something about cross-cultural creativity. Maybe she'd go. Maybe the universe would stop teasing her with coincidences. That evening, Hongdae, 7:45 p.m. The book event was held in a cozy gallery strung with fairy lights. Seoul's young creative crowd filled the room, notebooks open, lattes in hand. Evie found a seat near the back, soaking in the cadence of 2 authors discussing storytelling and courage. Halfway through the Q&A, the door opened quietly. He stepped in, dark coat, familiar stride, hair slightly tousled from the wind. He scanned the room once, his gaze landing, then pausing. Evie's breath hitched. No way! He noticed her, and this time, he smiled first. After the talk, she lingered near a shelf, pretending to flip through books. When he approached, her heart did that inconvenient thing where it skipped like a scratched record. "Well, if it isn't Seoul's most forgetful coffee customer," she said, her grin teasing but her tone soft. Jong-Su chuckled. "And Brooklyn's most generous tourist." She raised an eyebrow. "You found me." He hesitated. "Technically, I found this event. You just happened to be the universe's encore." She laughed, folding her arms. "So, what do I owe the pleasure? Looking for someone else to pay for dessert?" He looked at her, really looked, as if trying to memorize the warmth behind her sarcasm. "I owe you thanks. And maybe a little more than coffee. Really? Planning to buy me stock options now? He smirked. Nothing that complicated. I'd just like to repay my debt properly. Her eyes softened. You don't owe me anything, Mr. He paused for the briefest second. He almost said it. Han Jong-Su, CEO of Han Group. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not when the air between them felt so untainted by titles. Just Jong-Su, he said instead. Well, just Jong-Su, she teased. I'm Evie. I know, he replied quietly. Her brows furrowed. You know? He lifted a finger toward the barista's lanyard across the room. Your name was on the cafe receipt. I kept it. A reminder to be more responsible. Evie shook her head, amused and a little touched. You kept the receipt? You're sentimental for someone who forgets his wallet. I'm selective about what I remember. There was a pause. Soft, unhurried. Somewhere outside, street musicians started playing a slow acoustic cover of Stand By Me. She tucked a braid behind her ear. So, how exactly do you plan to repay a coffee debt? His lips curved. I could show you a local spot, somewhere no tour guide would ever take you. Her curiosity flared. And it's not a scam? He chuckled lowly. You can keep your wallet this time, just in case. Evie smiled despite herself. Something about him. Mysterious, controlled, but oddly kind, made her want to take the risk. All right, she said finally, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Lead the way. Seoul's most expensive free drink. Jong-Su offered a slight bow, his eyes glinting. This time, it's on me. As they stepped into the cool Hongdae night, neon lights rippled over puddles and laughter spilled from the nearby food stalls. She didn't know that this short walk would be the first step into a love story that would rewrite both of their lives. And he didn't know that the woman beside him, the one with laughter brighter than city light, would become his reason to build something greater than wealth. The air carried the faint smell of roasted chestnuts. He glanced sideways at her, thinking quietly, who is she? He didn't have the answer yet. But for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. It was just supposed to be a quick walk. At least, that's what Jong-Su told himself when he offered to take Evie to a local food spot that night. But somehow, one quiet street became three, and the buzz of the Hongdae crowd faded into the warmth of neon signs and sizzling pans. The night air smelled like roasted chestnuts and soy glaze. Somewhere nearby, an ajumma yelled orders over the clatter of tteokbokki being stirred in giant red trays. Evie walked beside him, with her hoodie sleeves rolled to the elbows, cheeks pink from the cold, hands tucked in her jacket pockets. Her braid crown glowed slightly under the golden streetlights. I still can't believe I found a mandu cart open this late, she said, biting into a steamed dumpling with joy that made Jong-Su smile without realizing it. They never close, he replied, watching her. It's Seoul. People live at night here. She glanced over. Do you? Used to, he said. Now? It depends. They paused under a dim awning. Evie handed him one of her dumplings without asking. He blinked, surprised. You're not going to ask if I want one? Nope. I'm being generous. Like with the coffee. He laughed. So, this is part of your personal philanthropy program? Exactly, she said, mock serious. I believe in investing in strangers with good cheekbones. Jong-Su nearly choked on the mandu, laughing low into the cold air. Evie's laughter followed, light and true, and for a moment, it felt like the world had no expectations. They kept walking, crossing a small footbridge over a stream lit with hanging lanterns. Seoul, at that hour, had an intimacy that daylight couldn't touch. Quiet corners, soft reflections, space to exhale. Evie slowed, then leaned against the railing. I almost didn't come here, she said softly, eyes on the water. Korea, I mean. He stood beside her, close but not crowding. Why not? She hesitated. I'd been working in corporate communications for 6 years. Same company, same patterns, meetings about meetings, bosses who thought volume meant leadership. He nodded. He knew that world all too well. One day I just looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself, she said, her voice quieter now. So I quit. Sold a bunch of stuff. Booked a flight. No plan. Just escape. He turned to face her, something shifting in his chest. That's not escape, he said. That's courage. She blinked, caught off guard. Most people called it a breakdown. Most people are afraid of silence, he said. You listen to it? That's rare. She gave a half smile, eyes glinting. And what about you, Mr. Wallet Forgetter? What do you do when you're not being rescued by random black girls in cafes? Jong-Su hesitated. He had rehearsed a dozen responses earlier, but standing there, under yellow lights with her truth still hanging in the air, he couldn't give her the real one. Not yet. He smiled lightly. Logistics. Evie narrowed her eyes playfully. Logistics? That's vague. Well, I coordinate people. Time, resources, projects. That's literally what every K-drama villain says before it's revealed he's secretly the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. He chuckled. So I sound suspicious. Very. But you seem too emotionally repressed to be a villain. He laughed again, too quickly. She was disarming him, and he knew it. He liked it more than he wanted to. All right then, she said, pushing off the railing. I'll assume you're a harmless logistics guy with a mysterious past and a growing Mandu addiction. And I'll assume you're a fearless tourist with incredible instincts and terrible judgment in men. I paid for your coffee, she reminded. Exactly, he teased. They shared a smile that lasted too long. Later, they sat on a bench near the Han River, cups of corn tea steaming between them. Evie leaned back, watching the distant lights on the bridge shimmer like fallen stars. Jong-Su stole glances when she wasn't looking. He wanted to tell her about the company, about the headlines, about how he'd built brands and luxury empires and boardrooms that bowed when he walked in. But she didn't care about that. She saw him, and for the first time in years, he didn't want to ruin that by telling her who the world thought he was. Instead, he said, I haven't laughed like that in a long time. Evie looked over, surprised by the softness in his voice. Maybe you should forget your wallet more often, she said. He held her gaze. Maybe I needed to lose it, just to find this moment. She didn't reply, but she didn't look away either. The night hummed quietly around them. He didn't touch her hand. She didn't lean her head on his shoulder, but it felt like something had just started, something neither of them fully understood yet. Seoul at dawn was half asleep. The streets were washed in a pale mist, the neon lights dimming as the first blush of sun brushed the rooftops. Evie hadn't realized how long they'd been walking until the air started to cool her skin and her laughter faded into quiet peace. They had talked for hours about cities that never rest, about failure, about the strange loneliness that follows ambition. He never offered more than fragments of his life, but each one felt deliberate. When she finally checked the time, she blinked in disbelief. 4:58 a.m.? Oh no, my hotel's gonna think I joined a K-pop band. Jong-Su smiled faintly. We could grab one last coffee before you face judgment. They found a tiny riverside cafe just opening its shutters. Inside, the smell of espresso wrapped around them like memory. He ordered for both of them. Americano for him, latte for her, and they sat by the window as the sky slowly softened into gold. No kiss, no hand held, just two people sharing a silence that somehow said more than any confession could. Evie stirred her drink lazily. You know, she murmured, I think Seoul finally feels like it's breathing again. Maybe because I stopped running long enough to listen. He looked at her, studying the light on her face. Maybe because you're part of what it's breathing. She laughed softly. You're either poetic or sleep-deprived. Both, he admitted. For a moment, she thought he was going to reach across the table. Instead, he leaned back and simply said, I don't usually stay up all night with strangers. Then maybe I'm not one anymore, she said. He smiled at that, an honest, quiet smile that reached his eyes. Later that morning, Evie returned to her hotel, exhaustion tangled with joy. She didn't even bother pulling the curtains. She just collapsed on the bed, face buried in the pillow, grinning into the sheets. Her journal lay half open beside her. She grabbed a pen, still half dreaming, and scribbled across the page. He listens like he's searching for something he lost years ago. Then, with a sigh, she closed her eyes. Across town, Jong-Su stood in his penthouse office, still wearing last night's coat. The city sprawled beneath him, his empire, his glass cage. He should have felt satisfaction. Instead, he felt restless. He picked up his phone. Min-jae, he said. His assistant's voice came over the line instantly. Yes, sir? Find out more about Evie Janbett, he said, his tone even but distant. Her background, what she does, where she's staying. But, he paused, rubbing the back of his neck. Do it respectfully. No overreach. Yes, sir. Understood. He ended the call but didn't move for a long time. His reflection in the window looked like a man divided between two worlds, the one he'd built and the one he just discovered existed. By 10 o'clock, he was in the boardroom. The Han Group directors had already gathered, their polished shoes and sharp suits lined up like chess pieces. The lead investor, a thick-voiced man from a powerful conglomerate, was midway through a presentation about global expansion. Chairman Han, one director prompted, if we secure the Mirai partnership, we triple our valuation by Q3. Jong-Su nodded automatically, but his mind wasn't there. He watched the numbers flicker across the screen and thought instead about Evie's words from the night before. How she said she'd quit her job because it was killing her joy. For years, he'd branded luxury as perfection, precision, immaculate control. But sitting across from her last night, eating dumplings on a park bench, he'd realized something he'd never noticed. Luxury without soul was just expensive emptiness. Mr. Han, one of the directors interrupted. Your decision? Jong-Su blinked. What? The Mirai merger. We need your approval today. He leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. I'll review the proposal again. The room shifted uncomfortably. One executive spoke under his breath. Sir, this has been in motion for 6 months. Then another 12 hours won't hurt, he said simply. There was a finality in his tone that silenced the room. As the directors filed out, Min-jae entered quietly with a folder. Sir, regarding your earlier request, Evie Janbett, American, Brooklyn, former communications consultant, on a solo vacation, staying near Mapo-gu. She's flying home in 3 weeks. Jong-Su's eyes flicked to the folder, but he didn't open it. Destroy it, he said. Min-jae hesitated. Sir, I don't want to know her through reports. I want to know her through conversation. He set the folder aside and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. Below, Seoul pulsed with life. Neon billboards glowed faintly against morning clouds. And for the first time in years, Han Jong-su, South Korea's most precise, disciplined CEO, felt inspired. Not by profit, not by competition, but by a woman who had bought him a coffee without knowing his name. He called his design team. Cancel the Mirai presentation, he said. I want to start concept drafts for something new. A pause. What kind of concept, sir? He glanced out at the river where Dawn had first met her smile. Something that redefines luxury, he said quietly. Something kind. And somewhere, In a quiet hotel room overlooking Seoul, Evie stirred in her sleep, unaware that her laughter and late-night honesty had just rewritten the future of a billion-dollar empire. Morning sunlight filtered through Seoul's skyline, turning glass towers into molten gold. Evie sat in the hotel cafe, sipping her coffee and flipping absently through the glossy pages of Seoul Vogue Business. She wasn't really reading, just killing time before heading out. Then the page turned, and her world stopped. Han Jong-su, Korea's youngest lifestyle conglomerate, CEO. She blinked. Once? Twice. There he was. The same man who'd claimed to work in logistics. The man she'd shared mandu with under streetlights. The man who had looked at her like the city itself had stopped breathing. The caption beneath the photo read, "Known for his discretion and perfectionism, Han Jong-su remains an enigma in Korea's luxury empire." Her coffee went cold in her hands. For a long moment, she just stared at the magazine. Her chest tightened, not from anger at the lie itself, but at what it meant. She had opened herself up, talked about her fears, her failures, and the whole time, he had been sitting across from her as him, a man who built empires and couldn't trust anyone to like him without one. She closed the magazine carefully, her hands trembling only slightly. That afternoon, the same cafe by the Han River buzzed softly with early customers. The same barista behind the counter smiled when he saw Evie walk in. "Back again?" he asked cheerfully. "Yeah," she said tightly, sliding into the seat by the window. "I'll wait for someone." She didn't order anything, just sat there, her mind spinning. Half an hour later, the bell above the door chimed. He walked in. Dark coat, calm expression, every inch of him the man from the magazine cover. Only this time, she didn't see just Jong-su. She saw Han Jong-su, CEO, billionaire, liar. His gaze softened the moment he spotted her. "Evie." She stood, voice steady but edged with disbelief. "You let me think you were broke." "Evie." "No. Don't you dare smooth this over with charm. You let me pay for you, Jong-su. You..." She caught herself, exhaled through clenched teeth. "You let me believe I was meeting someone real." He didn't flinch. He simply looked at her like he'd been waiting for this moment. "You did." "That's not what I meant," she said, shaking her head. "You lied." He took a small step closer. "I didn't lie," I omitted. Her laugh was sharp. "Oh, that's comforting." "Evie," he said quietly, "I didn't stop you because for the first time in years, I wanted to earn something without my name buying it first." She froze. He continued, eyes unwavering. "You didn't let me forget who I was before the boardrooms, before the numbers. That's why I didn't stop you." Her throat tightened. His sincerity disarmed her. But the ache of betrayal was still fresh. "Do you know what it feels like," she whispered, "to think you met someone ordinary and kind, only to realize you were just an anecdote in a billionaire's week?" His voice lowered, pained. "You were never ordinary to me." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Behind them, the espresso machine hissed softly, filling the space between what could have been forgiveness and what couldn't yet be spoken. Evie swallowed hard. "I don't even know who I've been talking to, Jong-su." He wanted to reach for her hand, but he didn't deserve to. "Then let me show you," he said. She shook her head. "No, you've already shown me enough." And with that, she turned and walked out into the cold. He didn't follow, not right away. He stood there, watching the door close, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, fear of losing something not tied to his empire. Hours later, his board gathered for the long-awaited presentation with the Mirai investors. "Sir," one of them urged, "we need your approval to proceed." The figures are unmatched, but Jong-su was staring at the projection screen without seeing a single number. His assistant leaned in quietly. "Sir, Are you all right? He stood abruptly. Cancel it. The boardroom went still. Excuse me? Cancel the merger, he said evenly. I'm scrapping the presentation. We're starting over. Sir, this is 6 months of preparation. I don't care. He met every gaze around the table, his tone unshakable. If this company is going to carry my name, it will represent something real, something human. Otherwise, it's just glass and ghosts. Then he walked out, leaving a room full of men who'd built fortunes, but never once considered meaning. Outside, he paused on the terrace, wind brushing his face. The sun was beginning to set over Seoul, painting the city in shades of tangerine and quiet fire. He thought of her laughter echoing down a narrow street, the dumpling crumbs she brushed from his sleeve, her honesty, her bravery, her kindness. He pulled the receipt from his wallet, the one she'd paid with, and unfolded it slowly. Her name, her handwriting, the price of one coffee. That was all it took to remind him that not every investment came with dividends. Some just left you wishing you could start over. He looked toward the Han River, the same place where their story had begun, and murmured under his breath, I won't let this end with a lie. The wind carried his words into the evening air, toward the woman who had unknowingly inspired an empire he'd only just begun to rebuild. 3 days passed. 3 long, infuriating, soul-searching days since Evie walked out of that cafe with her pride intact and her heart splintered. She had turned off her phone the first night, let the hotel staff send up tea instead of answering the knocks from concierge bearing a white envelope with her name on it, one that likely contained some grand apology, or worse, another receipt. She hadn't come to Korea for drama. She hadn't come to fall for a man. And she definitely hadn't come to fall for a man who turned out to be Han Jong-su. But here she was, angry at herself for missing him more than she wanted to admit. Meanwhile, Jong-su had never made this many mistakes in such a short span of time. Not in business, not in relationships, not even in his carefully guarded past. He had tried calling, texting. He even had Min-jae deliver flowers and a handwritten letter, signed not as CEO, but just Jong-su. No reply. And then, finally, an idea. Evie received the envelope around noon on her 4th day of silence. Inside was a first-class ticket to Jeju Island. The note was simple. No boardrooms, no cameras, just an apology and a quiet place to give it. Jong-su. She stared at the ticket, heart pounding. Jeju, the island of lovers, honeymooners, dreamers. Nice try. She folded the ticket in half and tucked it back in the envelope. The next morning, she was surprised to receive another note, this one much less poetic. Private Product Concept Review, Friday, 3 p.m. Han Group Innovation Building, 16th floor. No dress code, no strings. At the bottom, if you won't let me apologize in Jeju, then come challenge me in Seoul. And so she went, not because she forgave him, not because she was curious, but because something in her gut said this wasn't about romance anymore. This was about truth. Friday, 3:02 p.m., 16th floor. Evie stepped into the sleek glass conference room, wearing jeans, a statement tee that read, Don't mistake my grace for silence, and no makeup. 5 men and 1 woman in sharp suits turned to look at her. The tension in the room tightened like wire. Jong-su stood at the head of the long table, dressed in charcoal gray, posture poised but eyes flickering with something unreadable when he saw her. She didn't sit. Not yet. Thank you for coming, he said softly. Evie gave a small nod. Don't thank me yet. He gestured to the screen behind him, which displayed a bold minimalist logo. KIND. He cleared his throat. This is our pilot for a new lifestyle brand that focuses not just on aesthetics, but on intentional generosity. Ethically sourced materials, cultural storytelling, and community investment. One executive murmured, "Too soft. Luxury needs bite." Another said, "Storytelling doesn't sell. Status does." Evie folded her arms. Is this what innovation looks like? 6 men in a room saying what people want without asking? A thick silence fell. Jong-Su said nothing. One older board member turned to her, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me, but who is she to speak like that?" Before Evie could answer, Jong-Su did. Clear, calm, unapologetic. "She's the reason we're innovating." Every head turned. He walked toward her, voice steady. "She's the reason I remembered what it feels like to build something with purpose, not just profit." Evie's jaw tensed. She wasn't here to be his symbol. But then he turned to the room. "She challenged me to think differently. You all know me. I built this company on luxury, control, image. But what if the new luxury isn't about perfection? What if it's about meaning, silence?" One of the younger members leaned forward. "What does this brand actually look like, Mr. Han?" Evie spoke without thinking. "It looks like a lifestyle line that respects the cultures it borrows from. Collaborates instead of extracts. Maybe pop-up stores that don't just sell products, but host local artists. A cafe that pays more than minimum wage and features fair trade suppliers. And yeah, maybe even packaging that doesn't scream opulence, but whispers intention." They stared at her. Jong-Su's lips curved, slow and proud. "Exactly." Another board member scoffed. "And the cost?" "Will be high," Jong-Su said, "but the reward will be loyalty, authenticity, legacy." Evie sat then, finally, as if she'd earned the right to occupy space in that room. And she had. After the meeting, the others filed out one by one, some still skeptical, some intrigued. Evie remained in her chair, arms crossed. Jong-Su approached slowly. "You didn't have to show up, but I'm glad you did." "I'm not here to be your moral mascot," she said. "If this is about proving something to your board." "It's not," he said gently. "It's about proving something to myself." She looked up at him. "You still lied." "I know," he nodded. "And if I could go back, I'd do it differently. But I won't ask you to forget it. I'll just ask, let me build differently." Evie stared at him, heart pounding for reasons she didn't fully understand. "You're stubborn," she said. "You're worse," he replied, smiling. There was a long pause. Then she stood, pulled her bag onto her shoulder, and gave him one final look. "Don't waste this," she said quietly, "because you just put kindness in the spotlight. If you mess that up, it won't be on me." He watched her walk away again, but this time it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a challenge, a beautiful, bold, Brooklyn-sized dare to build something real. Evie didn't expect the envelope waiting for her at the hotel desk. It was unmarked, no logo, no name, just her room number and the weight of another decision she wasn't sure she was ready to make. She carried it upstairs, set it on the bed, and stared at it for a full 5 minutes before finally breaking the seal. Inside wasn't a letter. It was a contract. Han Group, Creative Strategist, Global Concept Division, Full Access, Global Mobility, Equal Voting Rights and Development. No NDA traps. No optics-driven fluff. Just raw, outlined authority on a team building something called Project Kind. And at the bottom of the stack, one handwritten note on creamy stationery. "Evie, this isn't a gift. This is recognition. You're not a footnote to this vision. You're its blueprint. Jong-Su." She paced the room, holding the contract in one hand and frustration in the other. It was flattering. It was bold. It was tempting. But it was also dangerous. "I'm not about to be your shiny black face in a brochure," she muttered to the room. "I'm not going to be paraded around for diversity when I'm still the only one at the table." The memory of that boardroom still clung to her. how they looked at her like she was either an intruder or a gimmick. She wouldn't trade her soul for power dressed up in compliments. Not again. Not after everything she'd walked away from in New York. Later that evening, she met Jong-Su on the rooftop of the Han Group Design Tower. He had requested the meeting in person. No pressure, no cameras. The city stretched behind them, glistening in quiet humility beneath the violet sky. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You came." "I didn't sign." "I know. I read every line." "I hoped you would." She folded her arms. "If this is about pleasing your board—" "It's not." His tone cut through her doubt, calm and clear. "I'm not giving you a job, Evie. I'm building something around your gift." She studied his face, his eyes steady, his jaw, clenched not in ego, but sincerity. "You could have hired 100 Korean creatives," she said. "Ones with portfolios, pedigree, social clout. Why me? Because you see what I don't. You feel what others only pitch." He stepped closer. "And because when you speak, I don't just hear ideas. I hear the truth." She held his gaze, heartbeat quickening. "You still lied to me, Jong-Su." "I did," he said without flinching. "And every day since, I've tried to live more honestly than the last." The wind lifted between them, warm and soft, like Seoul was holding its breath. Evie looked down at the contract in her hand. "Will I actually have power? Or just the illusion of it?" "You'll have veto rights, budget discretion, final say on creative direction." "What about the title?" "Whatever you want it to be." "And if I challenge you?" "I'll listen." She exhaled slowly. "And what if this fails?" He smiled faintly. "Then at least we built something that mattered." Silence. Evie stepped toward the ledge, looking over the city that had somehow become her mirror. Unfamiliar, overwhelming, but full of hidden corners where new things could grow. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of being used, of falling for something again that looks like purpose, but ends in disappointment." Jong-Su's voice lowered. "Then let's build something disappointment can't undo." She turned to him. "That's a tall order." He nodded once. "I know, but so are you." A long pause. Then she picked up the pen he offered. No fanfare, no final sales pitch. Just that same simple steadiness he'd shown the night they shared mandu beneath street lamps. She signed. And with one stroke, Evie Janbett became more than just a tourist who paid for coffee. She became the co-architect of an empire not yet written. Hours later, Jong-Su returned to his apartment. The city shimmered beneath him. He looked at the original receipt she'd once tossed, the one he'd kept, now pressed flat in a leather journal. Under it, he carefully tucked a copy of her signed contract, not as proof of business, but as evidence of faith. Evie had never Googled herself before. She never had reason to. She wasn't famous. She wasn't controversial. She wasn't the kind of woman people wrote articles about. But on a Monday morning in Seoul, 5 days after she signed the contract, her name became a headline. "Foreign woman, seen with Han Empire CEO, insider or infatuation, Brooklyn to boardroom, mystery woman, sparks internal shift at Han Group. Evie Janbett, girlfriend, consultant, Trojan horse." She stared at her phone, heart sinking. Under the bold, speculative headlines were photos, grainy but unmistakable. One of her arriving at Han Group HQ in jeans. One of her laughing with Jong-Su at a street vendor weeks earlier. Another of them standing too close during a late-night rooftop meeting, silhouetted against the city lights. Her inbox was already flooded. Some journalists asking for exclusive quotes. Others warning her that the public may not be ready for this type of influence. She put her phone down, hands trembling. So this was the price of proximity. By midday, the whispers had turned to wildfire. Internal murmurs at Han Group grew louder, and a few senior executives openly questioned whether her role was earned or emotionally motivated. In one board message thread that leaked, an anonymous partner wrote, "The brand was supposed to be about innovation, not romance." When Jong-Su saw the headlines, he didn't panic. He simmered. He had lived his entire adult life under scrutiny. His father's shadow, the market's pressure, the media's obsession with his solitude. He'd survived by building walls, by giving no one anything real to hold on to. But Evie had become real to him. Too real to ignore. Too real to let the world twist into a lie. Evie, on the other hand, felt cornered. "I can't do this," she said quietly, standing in his office late that night. Jong-Su looked up from his desk. "Evie." "I didn't sign up to become your scandal," she said, voice thin but controlled. "I signed up to help build something good. But this?" She motioned toward the magazine open on his desk. Han's American Flame. Disruption or distraction? "I'm not your tabloid trend, Jong-Su, and I'm not about to be turned into a stereotype." "You're not," he said firmly, "and I won't let them paint you as one." She hesitated. "Maybe I should step back, quietly, let it pass." "No, I'm not afraid," she said. "I'm just tired of fighting rooms I never asked to be in." He stood, crossed the space between them. "Then let me stand in front of the next one for you." 2 nights later, the Han Group Annual Philanthropy Gala, a ballroom wrapped in crystal chandeliers and whispers. The elite of Seoul's business world gathered, dressed in formal wear and false curiosity. Evie hadn't planned to come, but the email from Min-jae was clear. Jong-Su will be speaking about the new division. He asked that you be there, only if you choose to. She chose. Not because she wanted to be seen, but because she wanted to be heard. She entered the ballroom in a sleek, off-shoulder black gown. No flashy jewels, no bodyguards, no need to dazzle. She carried herself like what she was, a woman who wasn't begging for a seat. She was the seat. Eyes turned, cameras clicked, voices buzzed. That's her. Is she really American? She doesn't look like a strategist. Jong-Su took the stage 20 minutes later. He wore classic black, no tie, calm, prepared. The lights dimmed, his voice carried. "I'm not going to pretend this year's gala feels normal," he began, "because it doesn't." This year, the Han Group made decisions that didn't follow precedent. We launched a new concept. We shifted our internal structure. We challenged our own definitions of luxury. A few board members looked down at their glasses. And some of you, his gaze swept the room, think that change has a face, a name, a motive. Evie froze where she stood near the back, pulse quickening. "You've seen her in headlines. You've whispered in corners. So let me say it plainly. Evie Janbett didn't come to me. I chased her. I invited her into this company, into this vision, and I'm not sorry." Silence. He looked directly into the front row, then continued. "Because when I met her, I saw the future of branding, not just in strategy, but in integrity. She reminded me that leadership without empathy is just tyranny in a suit. She didn't ask for the spotlight, but I will use mine to say she earned her place at this table. Not by bloodline, not by headlines, but by brilliance." A beat passed, then applause, real applause. The room clapped, not loudly at first, but steadily, with growing momentum. A few stood, then more. Even those who doubted her the most were forced to acknowledge what truth sounds like when spoken without fear. Evie stood frozen, heart in her throat. Someone beside her whispered, "That was for you, wasn't it?" She blinked, eyes shining. Yeah, it was. After the gala, they found each other outside beneath the glowing lights of the Han Tower entrance. He didn't say anything at first, just offered his hand. She took it. "You didn't have to do that," she said, voice low. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." She looked up at him. "It won't stop them from talking." "No," he said, "but now they'll be talking about the truth." She smiled slowly. "That was kind of romantic, you know." He leaned in just enough for his breath to graze her temple. "Good. Because I wasn't just defending my team," he murmured. "I was defending the woman I'm falling for." Evie's breath caught. But before she could respond, he added gently, "And I'll keep defending you until you don't need me to." In the reflection of the glass behind them, two silhouettes stood close, no longer hidden, not afraid, not defined by power, but by the choice to use it well. Approval came on a Wednesday. It wasn't loud, no confetti, no champagne, just a quiet email marked "confirmed" at the top, followed by one line from Jong-Su. "We're greenlit. It's time to build." Evie stared at the screen in disbelief, heart hammering. After weeks of late-night concept meetings, cultural consultations, and pitch after pitch, their dream had been approved by the full board. Kind Haven, the world's first Afro-Korean boutique lifestyle hotel, was no longer a vision. It was happening. The hotel would sit in Itaewon, at the intersection of heritage and global movement. Every detail would be intentional, from the reclaimed wood sourced from rural Korean haynocks to the handmade Ankara print textiles flown in from Accra. It would be a space of belonging, where Korean artisans, African diasporic designers, and curious global travelers could all breathe in something real, not just luxury, legacy. By Friday, the 12th floor creative war room buzzed with energy. Evie stood at the center like a quiet force of nature. Her hair was pulled into a soft updo, gold hoops gleaming. Her team, 3 Korean interns from Seoul Art University and 2 American creatives from her Brooklyn network, hung on her every word. "Okay," she said, pointing to a wall of concept sketches. "This isn't about blending cultures until they lose their meaning. It's about honoring them, which means, yes, collaboration, but also boundaries, respect, research, intent." One intern raised her hand shyly. "Can we feature African ingredients in the minibar offerings?" Evie's eyes lit up. "Absolutely. But not just West African. Let's think globally. Diaspora snacks too. Haitian ginger bites, Jamaican coconut drops. Let's surprise people without pandering." Applause. Smiles. The team got it. They were building something new. Something that didn't just perform diversity, but centered it. Later that evening, Evie found herself in the Design Tower's rooftop lounge again, surrounded by swatches, aroma testers, and playlists labeled Kind Vibes, soft jazz, soul, gugak fusion. She didn't hear him walk in. "I never thought I'd see anyone enjoy hotel logistics this much," Jong-Su teased. She turned with a grin. "These aren't logistics. These are soul maps." He smiled, then sobered. "I wanted to thank you for leading today, for pushing the team." "I didn't do it alone," she said. "You gave me room to breathe." He sat beside her on the low sofa. The city glowed in soft blue and gold outside the glass. After a pause, he said quietly, "My mother would have loved this." Evie looked at him gently. "Tell me about her." He swallowed. "She died when I was 9. Heart failure. Sudden. She loved warm places, natural things, laughed too loudly. She used to paint birds on old porcelain bowls." Evie leaned closer. "What about your father?" A muscle flickered in his jaw. "My father built the Han group with no room for breath. I remember him saying, 'Rest is for men who don't have vision.' I spent my teens studying while others lived, got my first board seat at 23, and by 30, I had everything except peace." The silence between them turned sacred. Not awkward, not sad, just open. He looked at her, his voice lower now. Sometimes I wonder if my father ever really grieved, or if he just built until the silence disappeared. Evie reached across the armrest, her fingers brushing his. Slowly, gently, she placed her hand in his. You don't have to inherit the burnout, she said. Jong-Su's eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time in all the years he'd built his empire, he heard it. He didn't have to wear his father's exhaustion like a badge. I want kind to be different, he said softly. Not just a brand, but a place where people exhale. She smiled. Then we start with you. No more chasing legacy while losing yourself. His fingers tightened around hers. You do realize, he said, you've become the blueprint I didn't know I needed. Then you better not misread me, she replied playfully. He laughed, a deep, grounded sound. They stayed like that for a while, hands intertwined, no need for the world to approve. The city moved around them, fast and sharp, but in their little corner, something slower bloomed. Not just attraction, understanding. The kind that builds trust brick by brick. And in that moment, Evie realized they weren't just building an empire. They were building each other. The first sign that the storm had arrived came in the form of a headline. Han Group CEO's muse under fire. Insider footage raises ethical questions. Evie stared at her phone in disbelief. The words blurred. Her ears buzzed. She clicked the article. A leaked video, her laughing with Jong-Su late at night in the design lounge, her head tipped back, his gaze locked on her. Another clip, her giving a passionate pitch to the kind interns, while Jong-Su watched from the back, silent but clearly moved. The footage was edited just enough to twist meaning. The captions did the rest. Romance or reckless favoritism. Brooklyn strategist gains unusual influence over Han Empire. Attached was a document, an internal funding proposal she'd written, still in draft stage. Someone had leaked it with red circles around a few bolded numbers, making it look like she'd approved resources before the board's vote. She hadn't, but now it looked like she had. Her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. A clipped voice. Miss Janbett. This is the Internal Affairs Office of Han Group. We've been advised to begin an inquiry into the recent breach of protocol concerning your involvement in Project Kind. Evie didn't cry. She didn't panic. She simply stood and walked. Meanwhile, Jong-Su was already in motion. Min-jae had called him as soon as the footage hit the press. The leaked clips had originated from an IP address linked to Do Mi-ran, his ex-fiancée. She hadn't just returned to Seoul. She had returned with purpose and with company. Her new fiancé? None other than the head of the Mirai Group, the powerful investor Jong-Su had rejected during the original merger talks months ago. They had come for revenge. Jong-Su burst into the boardroom an hour later, interrupting a crisis meeting already in session. Every director turned toward him. Some looked at him with sympathy, others with suspicion. One of them, old, stiff, self-important, stood. Mr. Han, this has gone too far. She did nothing wrong, Jong-Su said flatly. There are documents, Jong-Su, internal videos, unexplained figures. This isn't about preference anymore. It's about public trust. She's being framed. The same man raised an eyebrow. Then explain why your former fiancé had access to security files from inside this building. How did she even know where to look? Jong-Su's jaw clenched. Because I trusted people I shouldn't have. Not her, them. And I won't let Evie pay the price for my mistakes. But by the time he got to her office, her desk was empty. Gone. The kind intern sat quietly, unsure what to say. A single manila envelope lay on the desk. Inside, her security badge, a thumb drive with her project files, and a short handwritten note. Jong-Su, I didn't come to destroy your legacy. I came because you made space for something human. Please don't let the world turn this into war. Walk gently. Build bravely. Evie. It was raining by the time he found her. She stood under the same cafe awning where they'd first met. Her hoodie up, luggage by her side, flight confirmation on her phone. He approached slowly, breath short, suit soaked. You weren't even going to let me fight for you? She didn't look at him right away. You're already fighting enough battles. This one doesn't need my name written all over it. Evie. I'm not leaving because I'm guilty, she said, voice firm. I'm leaving because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step away before everything burns. He stared at her. I don't need the job, she added. I never did. But I also won't be used as a pawn, not by the media, not by your enemies, and not even by your good intentions. He shook his head, blinking rain from his lashes. Don't say that. I didn't use you. I know, she whispered. That's why this hurts. Their eyes met, and for a single suspended moment, there was only the sound of rain between them. I believed in what we were building, she said, but I won't be your weakness, Jong-Su. He took a breath. You were never my weakness. Her eyes glistened. Then prove it. Let this brand stand without needing to defend me. Let it breathe. And if it survives, if you survive, maybe we'll find each other on the other side. He wanted to beg her to stay, but he also understood, because love built on pressure could never breathe. So instead, he nodded slowly. You're not walking away. You're walking with integrity. I learned from the best, she said. She turned, walked down the sidewalk, suitcase trailing behind her. He didn't stop her, but he did whisper something only the wind could hear. I didn't fall for your kindness. I fell because you made me believe I could be kind, too. That night, he returned to the office and opened the folder she left behind. At the top of her project file was the original mission statement she'd once scribbled on a napkin during their first concept session. Let kindness be the currency of legacy. And now, he would make sure it was. The station platform hummed with quiet urgency. Announcements echoed in Korean over the intercom, the voice calm and measured. Rain drummed gently against the curved glass roof of Seoul Station, blurring the world outside into streaks of silver. Evie stood near track 4, one hand gripping the handle of her suitcase, the other tucked into her coat pocket. Her passport stuck out slightly from the top of her tote. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten much either. It was her last day in Seoul. Not officially, maybe, but emotionally, definitely. She told herself the train to Busan was a transition, not an escape. A few days by the sea. Time to breathe. Then maybe Tokyo, or back to New York. Somewhere she could disappear without headlines. Somewhere she didn't have to see the fallout of a love story that collided with power and politics. She closed her eyes and inhaled slowly. I didn't come to destroy your legacy. The words she'd written in that note to Jong-Su haunted her more than she cared to admit. Across the plaza, beneath a line of vending machines and flickering lights, Jong-Su sat on a long metal bench. Soaked, suit rumpled, no umbrella. He had been there for over an hour, waiting, watching, praying she hadn't changed her departure time. In his hand, clutched like it still meant something, was the same crumpled cafe receipt she'd once thrown away. The one with her name, 12,001 for 2 drinks, and the timestamp that changed his life. Evie. He should have stopped her earlier. He should have protected her sooner. But now, there was no boardroom, no shield of prestige, no one to spin his words or soften his flaws, just him and her, and the rain. He saw her through the station glass. She hadn't seen him yet. She looked calm, composed. but he knew her too well now. That wasn't peace. It was survival. He stood up slowly and walked toward the entrance, raindrops slipping from his coat sleeves like they too were trying to let go. Evie caught the movement in her peripheral vision first. Then her eyes snapped to him. She froze. He stood just outside the station, across from the exit doors, soaked from head to toe, hair dripping, jacket darkened with rain. In his hand, something small and worn. Their receipt. She stared at him. His presence cracked something deep in her chest she'd worked hard to lock away. Slowly, she pulled her suitcase away from the track line and walked toward the glass doors. They slid open with a hiss. He didn't move. He just stood there, eyes fixed on her like she was both the beginning and end of something sacred. When she finally reached him, the air between them shimmered with tension. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. He held out the receipt. "I kept this," he said, voice raw. "I used to think it reminded me to be more responsible. But it reminded me of you, of what kindness feels like when it doesn't need to perform." She looked down at the soggy paper in his hand. Her name, the timestamp, everything that had started on accident. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. "I did," he said, stepping closer, "because I thought letting you walk away was the right thing to do. That I had to choose between protecting you and protecting my company. And now?" she asked, barely breathing. "Now I realize something else," he said, chest rising. "The empire means nothing if you're not in it." She blinked, her lips parting. "Jong-Su!" He stepped even closer, rain dripping from his lashes. "Let them spin their stories. Let them gossip. I don't care anymore. I've spent half my life trying to prove I could lead with strength. You taught me what it means to lead with soul." Tears gathered in her eyes, blurring the lines of his face. He took her hand, not forcefully, just enough. "Evie," he said, voice shaking. "Stay. Not for the project, not for the press, for us." A train rumbled behind her. Departure alert, 5 minutes. She looked past him at the street, the people, the way the rain fell gently now, as if softening the entire city. And then she looked back into his eyes. Warm, honest, broken, open. She whispered, "Say it again." He stepped even closer. "The empire means nothing if you're not in it." And that's when she dropped the handle of her suitcase. They didn't kiss, not yet, but they stood there, forehead to forehead, while the rain soaked through every piece of pride and pain they'd both worn for weeks. She didn't get on the train. He didn't let go of her hand. And somewhere in Seoul, the future quietly shifted, because two people chose each other not out of convenience or safety, but because they finally understood what it meant to build something that couldn't be bought. It wasn't in the news. Not at first. There were no press conferences, no viral headlines, just a single, deliberate email sent from Jong-Su's private account to a list of 27 people, the ones who had once held the strings to every decision he made. Subject line, termination of partnership and transfer of holdings. Effective immediately. Attached was a legally airtight, strategically brutal withdrawal notice from the Han Group's original empire. The legacy business started by his father, controlled by silent shareholders who preferred image over innovation. Jong-Su had walked away, not out of impulse, not for drama, but because he knew now that he couldn't build a future while dragging the bones of a system that refused to evolve, and he wasn't walking away alone. 2 days later, in a quiet studio overlooking the Han River, Jong-Su stood barefoot on polished concrete, looking over a newly printed nameplate. Kind, a culture-forward collective, Jong-Su Han and Evie Janbett, co-founders. He placed the nameplate on a floating shelf beside a fresh potted plant and a stack of their concept sketchbooks. The sun poured in through full-length windows. The room didn't feel corporate. It felt lived in, warm, focused. But when Evie walked in, eyes scanning the space, her steps froze as they landed on the plaque. She stared, then blinked, then turned to him slowly. "You didn't," he smiled. "I did. You put my name on the company." "I put your name on our company," he corrected, folding his arms. "You're the reason it exists." "I never asked for that kind of power," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "That's why you deserve it." She shook her head, a hint of nervous laughter spilling out. "Jong-Su, this makes me a target, a liability, and I don't need credit." "I do," he said, "because I've spent too much of my life taking credit for things built by people I didn't see clearly until it was too late. That's not happening again." Evie lowered herself onto the edge of a curved leather bench, overwhelmed. "You can't just make me your co-founder like you're giving me a lifetime achievement award." "I'm not," he said gently. "I'm making you co-founder because I wouldn't trust this with anyone else. You don't just have vision, Evie. You have conviction. That's rarer than talent." She glanced at the window, jaw tightening. "What if people say I didn't earn it?" "They already did," he said. "And when they did, you walked away to protect something bigger than your reputation." She said nothing. So he stepped forward, pulled something from his pocket, and knelt in front of her. Not with a ring, but with a folded dried cafe receipt, her name still visible at the top. "You paid for coffee," he said quietly, unfolding it with care. "I paid for everything else. Let's call it even." Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. "And if I say no," she whispered, "I'll still build this," he said, "but it won't be kind without you, because you're what made it human. You're the return clause I didn't know I needed." She looked down at him, at this man who once built skyscrapers out of silence and now stood drenched in vulnerability, offering her something no title could fully define: equality, faith, trust. She took the receipt from his hand and smiled. "Then let's build something even the skeptics can't ignore." 1 week later, Evie and Jong-Su stood side by side in front of a small group of global advisors, designers, and social entrepreneurs from around the world. Behind them, the Kind logo pulsed on a white canvas screen. Evie spoke first. "No brand, no matter how well designed, can replace lived experience. We're not here to sell inspiration. We're here to partner with it. Culture isn't packaging, it's people, and we're committed to honoring that." Applause. Then Jong-Su stepped forward. "For years, I was taught that building an empire meant moving fast, talking louder, and climbing higher. But sometimes, the best thing you can do is sit down beside someone and listen." He looked over at Evie. "And sometimes, the greatest investment you'll ever make isn't into property or products or shares. It's into someone who sees the blueprint of who you could be, before you even dare to build it." There was a pause, a beat, and then standing ovation. Evie didn't look out at the crowd. She just looked at him and whispered, "We haven't even started yet." There was no red carpet, no fireworks, no influencers posing in front of filtered signage, no overpriced champagne flutes. When Kind launched, it did so the same way it was born, quietly, intentionally, and rooted in something deeper than trend. A restored 3-story Hanok in the heart of Itaewon served as the flagship. The wood was sourced from dismantled village homes in Gangwon-do. The glass counters were hand-blown in Kenya. The soft furnishings were dyed with natural indigo and clay from Ghana, sewn by survivors of trafficking in collaboration with a nonprofit Evie once interned with back in Brooklyn. No detail was an afterthought. The entire space pulsed with stories. You didn't walk into Kind to shop. You walked in to feel seen. They launched with 4 product lines: hearth, ethical homeware, and incense rooted in cultural memory. Steps, Footwear designed by global artisans in Seoul, Dakar, and Oaxaca. Speak, limited-run journals printed with proverbs and poetry in multiple languages. Still, teas and herbs sourced from Black and Korean farmers committed to restorative land practices. Each shelf bore a QR code that, when scanned, told the story behind the object, not just where it was made, but who made it and why. And the tagline written on the front wall, etched in both Hangul and English, whispered the brand's mission: kindness, culture, kingdom. On launch day, the cafe inside buzzed gently with customers, mothers with strollers, Seoul creatives on their lunch breaks, curious tourists holding mugs made from recycled river clay. Evie stood near the front display, watching an elderly Korean woman tear up as she read the story of a Nigerian weaver who designed the textile on the pillow she was holding. "She made this by hand?" the woman asked. Evie nodded. "It's called Aso Oke. Her name is Tolu. Her signature is stitched on the back." The woman placed the pillow gently back on the shelf and bowed. Evie smiled, tears prickling the corners of her eyes. She never imagined she'd find home in a place like this, between two cultures that once felt too far apart to touch. Meanwhile, Jong-Su stood by the window, observing it all with a quiet awe. This was nothing like the launches he'd done in the past. No staged exclusivity, no artificial scarcity, no high-gloss, low-soul campaigns. And yet this was the most valuable thing he had ever helped build. He watched Evie laugh with the staff, the light catching in her hair, and thought, this is the legacy, not the logo, not the press, not the empire his father once forced onto him like a crown too heavy to wear. By the end of the week, sales had quietly eclipsed every projection. Global press picked up the story. Kind redefines luxury through cultural integrity. Evie Janbett and Han Jong-Su turned scandal into strategy. When kindness becomes capital, a brand that's actually different. One article in Harper's Soul declared, where the Han Group refused to innovate, Kind dared to reimagine. And in one particularly delicious twist of fate, several of the same Han Group board members, who had once called Evie a distraction, now scrambled to replicate the model she pioneered. From branding copy to product sourcing, it became clear. What they rejected was now what they revered. One afternoon, Jong-Su received an invitation from his father's former lead strategist, an offer to return for a strategic alliance. He placed the letter on his desk, then slid it across to Evie. She skimmed it, then arched a brow. "Did they forget you walked out of that boardroom for a reason?" "They remember," he said, lips curling faintly. "They just thought I'd get tired of doing things differently." "Are you?" He looked at her like she was the answer to every unspoken prayer. "Not for a second." She leaned over the desk, planting a soft kiss at the corner of his mouth. "Good," she murmured, "because this is what legacy looks like." That evening, they hosted a community dinner on the rooftop garden of the flagship store. No press, no suits, just the artisans, interns, neighborhood elders, and friends who had helped shape the journey. Jong-Su stood to give a toast, one hand holding a mug of cinnamon tea, the other loosely interlaced with Evie's under the table. "My mother once told me," he began, "that you don't measure a man's life by what he builds, but by who it blesses." He looked out at the rooftop full of people from different languages, backgrounds, and generations, laughing beneath string lights and Seoul's golden skyline. "And tonight, I finally understand what she meant." He turned to Evie, eyes warm, voice lower. "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you walk with, while you're still here." Evie clinked her mug to his. "To walking together," she whispered, and as the night wrapped them in quiet belonging, neither of them needed to say the obvious. This was more than a business. It was a blueprint, and the legacy had only just begun. Spring arrived in Seoul like a soft breath. The skies turned pale blue, the air warmed with hints of citrus blossom and rain-washed streets, and the cherry trees, sudden and glorious, erupted into a silent symphony of pink. Evie had seen spring before. In Brooklyn, it arrived grudgingly, stubbornly, a few brave daffodils, a thaw. But here, spring felt like an apology from winter, like a love letter from a city learning how to hope again. And on this particular evening, Jong-Su asked her to meet him beneath the trees lining a quiet path near the old river cafe, the same place where it all began. Evie arrived just before sunset, her curls pinned loosely, the hem of her long cream coat brushing her calves as she walked. She spotted him leaning against the trunk of a cherry tree, hands tucked in the pockets of his linen blazer. The petals fell around him like the world had paused to make room for what was about to happen. "Hey," she said softly. He turned and smiled, that slow, quiet smile that always made her forget how to breathe properly. "You came. Wouldn't miss cherry blossom season with Seoul's favorite soft launch romantic." He laughed, stepped toward her, and held out his hand. She took it without hesitation. They began to walk, petals crunching faintly beneath their shoes, the light fading gently between the branches. There weren't many people around, just a couple of elders on a bench, a teenage girl taking selfies with her dog, and the breeze weaving gently between it all. "I didn't think I'd still be here a year ago," Evie murmured. "I did," Jong-Su said, glancing sideways at her. She raised an eyebrow. "You were that confident?" He shrugged with a smirk. "No, I was that desperate." She laughed, squeezing his hand. "I just knew," he added, softer now, "that if I ever got the chance to start over, I didn't want to do it alone." They reached the wooden footbridge that curved over the narrow stream. Lanterns hung above them, casting a golden hue over the path. A perfect hush blanketed the moment. Evie paused. "This is where you first lied to me." He smiled sheepishly. "Technically, I just omitted my global net worth. Same difference. Fair." They stood in silence again. Then Jong-Su exhaled, stepped back, and dropped to one knee. Evie's breath caught. But instead of a ring box, he pulled out a small brass key on a leather cord. Her brow furrowed. "It's not for an apartment," he said, "or a ring. Not yet." She stared at him, her heart suddenly dangerously full. "It's the key," he continued, "to the cafe. The one where we met. The one you paid at." She blinked. "You bought it?" He nodded. "Not for the brand. Not for a franchise. Just for us. I had it restored exactly how it was that morning. Same barista, same coffee blend, same seat by the window." Evie's lips parted, but no sound came out. "I wanted a place where the world didn't meet us first," he said, "where we could be real. No press, no board, no past mistakes." He held up the key. "To the cafe we bought, where we met. I want to build our real story there. Coffee, truth, and no secrets." Her hand trembled as she reached for it. The moment their fingers touched, a wind rustled through the trees above them, and petals rained gently between their joined hands. Evie knelt down beside him. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to meet him there, in the vulnerability he offered. She took the key and smiled through the quiet tears forming in her eyes. "No secrets," she whispered. "No secrets," he promised. They stood together, pink petals settling on their shoulders like soft blessings. And somewhere in the breeze, it felt like the world finally caught up to their beginning. That night, the cafe lights glowed for the first time under their name. No menu yet, no customers, just 2 mugs, 2 chairs, and a memory restored. Not for nostalgia, but for the future. Because some legacies are best written in small spaces. with big hearts. The calls started at 8 a.m. Then came the emails, the calendar pings, the polite but increasingly panicked text from Jong-Su's executive team. Sir, the Tokyo trade call is in 20 minutes. Sir, the Singapore team is asking for confirmation on the investor summit. Are you running late or rerouting? No reply. Min-jae stood outside Jong-Su's office by 9:30 a.m., double-checking the silence. The lights were off. The car hadn't been moved. No chauffeur had been dispatched. It was the first time in 5 years that Jong-Su Han had missed an entire morning of operations without explanation. But Evie, she already knew where he was. She walked through the alley near the Han River just before 10, coat unbuttoned, scarf tucked loosely around her neck. The air was sweet with early spring, wet asphalt, flowering grass, and the faint scent of roasted beans wafting from the newly reopened cafe. Their cafe. It hadn't officially launched, no signage yet, no hours posted, but the door was always open. She stepped inside and found him exactly as she expected, seated at their window table, sleeves rolled up, no assistants, no devices, no suits, just Jong-Su and 2 mugs of coffee, one in front of him, one waiting. He looked up, eyes meeting hers like the morning had been holding its breath for her to arrive. You're missing 3 meetings, she said softly, removing her scarf. I know. She approached slowly, her boots making a soft click on the wooden floor. And you've got a trade call waiting in Tokyo. I know. She raised an eyebrow as she slid into the seat across from him. Did the world stop? Feels like it did. He offered her the untouched mug, her favorite, cinnamon latte, extra foam, light on the sugar. She smiled faintly and took a sip. I used to run empires to feel alive, he said, voice low, to feel important. Like I mattered, E. He looked out the window. Cherry blossom petals fluttered past the glass like whispers. But this, he turned back to her, this is the first time I've actually lived. Evie stared at him. The light hit his face just so, softening the hard lines, the pressure, the weight of all the expectations he once wore like armor. He looked unguarded, real, and suddenly everything stilled inside her, because she realized that this man, the one who had once built skyscrapers out of silence, was choosing stillness for her, choosing to be known, not perform, not protect, be. She stood slowly, came around the table, and sat beside him. Not across from him this time, not with a wall of caution between them. He turned his head to look at her, and for once, didn't say a word. She touched his jaw gently, letting her fingers brush the day-old stubble on his cheek. His breath caught. Then, without hesitation, Evie leaned in and kissed him, fully, no teasing, no tests, no room left for wondering, just heart meeting heart. Finally, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't timid. It was the kind of kiss that closes chapters and opens new ones all at once. His hand came up to cup the back of her neck, anchoring her as if the room might vanish if he let go. When they pulled back, breathless and slightly dazed, Evie rested her forehead against his. You're still not going to your meetings, are you? She whispered. Not a chance, he murmured, voice husky. They can wait. You can't, she chuckled, brushing her thumb against his bottom lip. You just kissed a Brooklyn girl in a coffee shop and canceled international deals. This is your most un-CEO day ever. And my best one, he said. They stayed in that cafe all afternoon. No laptops, no deadlines, just music playing softly from a small speaker, warm mugs growing cold, and 2 hearts catching up with everything they hadn't yet said. That night, back at the Kind office, Min-jae sent one final message to the executive thread. Chairman Han has postponed all remaining meetings until further notice. No explanation given. He's prioritizing peace. Because sometimes the boldest thing a man can do isn't launch a product, win a bid, or sign a billion-dollar deal. Sometimes it's showing up to a quiet cafe with no armor, just love, and letting that be enough. A year later, spring returned. Not in Seoul this time, but in New York, where cherry blossoms along the East River tried their best to mimic their Korean cousins. The city was alive again. Horns, coffee carts, laughter, life. And tucked between a line of brownstones and boutiques in Soho stood the newest chapter of their story, Kind House, the concept cafe. The awning was soft beige, the logo embossed in gold. The air smelled of roasted Ethiopian beans and vanilla foam. Inside, walls of exposed brick and warm oak shelves carried their story in every detail. Framed photos of artisans from Seoul, Ghana, Jeonju and Brooklyn, mugs engraved with quiet promises, journal shelves lined with affirmations written in 2 languages. And in the center, stretching across one long white wall, was the quote that started it all. She paid first, so he never let her pay again. Evie stood near the back counter wearing a simple cream blouse and gold hoops, her curls pinned up loosely. She was half listening to a conversation between a young barista and a tourist couple who wanted to know the story behind the wall. The barista smiled proudly. "It's true," she said. "Our founders met in Seoul. She bought him a coffee when he forgot his wallet." The couple laughed. "That's cute," the woman said. "Yeah," the barista replied. "Cute turned into an empire." Evie hid a smile behind her mug. An empire, she thought softly, glancing toward the corner table where Jong-Su stood, tall, composed, yet unmistakably at peace. He was talking to a small crowd of journalists and guests who had gathered for the opening. His Korean accent still laced his English, rich and melodic, but his words flowed easily now. He no longer spoke to prove. He spoke to share. When the microphones lowered, he raised his mug of black coffee and looked around the room. At Evie, at their team, at the strangers sipping warmth and hope. "To every stranger who's ever shown kindness," he said, voice steady but full of feeling, "you may be changing someone's future, even if you never know it." The crowd quieted. Then the applause came, not loud or theatrical, but real, heartfelt. Evie joined him at the front, sliding her hand into his, her thumb brushing over his ring finger. He looked at her, smiling. "We did it," she smirked. "Correction, we're doing it. Seoul's next." "Seoul's always next," he said. "It's where I first found you." "You didn't find me," she teased. "I found you, broken coffeeless." He laughed, that low, genuine sound that still melted her in seconds. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and the lights dimmed to a golden hush, Evie sat at one of the tables with her laptop open. A blank document stared back at her. The title read, The Kindness Empire, a memoir by Evie Janbett and Han Jong-Su. She smiled softly, then typed the first line. It started with 6001 and a man who didn't want to be rescued. It ended with a partnership that rewrote the meaning of success. She read it aloud once, whispering it into the hum of the empty cafe. Behind her, Jong-Su approached quietly, 2 mugs in hand, one for her, one for him. He placed hers beside her laptop and looked at the screen. "You wrote it," he said. She nodded. "It wrote itself." He brushed a curl from her cheek and bent down to kiss her temple. "You still make me want to forget meetings," he murmured. "And you still make me late for sleep," she teased, glancing up with a grin. He sat beside her, their shoulders touching as the rain began outside, tapping softly against the cafe windows. The city beyond them glowed, alive, endless, forgiving. A year's worth of change, A love that began with a small gesture. A life built on kindness, not as charity, but as legacy. Evie closed her laptop, leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Worth every penny." He chuckled, kissed her hair, and whispered back, "Worth every lifetime." And as they sat there beneath the soft hum of lights, their reflections shimmered faintly in the rain-kissed glass. Two people who had finally rewritten what empire, success, and love could mean. The end.